This is an enormous victory for Israel and Netanyahu.
Do you
Right.
think that with this chaos and now Hezbollah greatly weakened, they will move back into Lebanon? Do you think that this is something where Netanyahu might be riding this high and says this is the time to really try to
Yeah.
create as much of greater Israel as possible?
I think there's a very good chance of it. Yeah, I think we can see them move back into Lebanon. They were probably planning to try that anyway. This ceasefire, it never seemed like they were very serious about it, right? They've been violating it left and right from the beginning. Um, so, yeah, I think we could see they're probably confident that Hezbollah will not be able to put up the resistance that they did last time and that they'll go back in and they may seize, a strip of land in southern Lebanon. And then there'll be tremendous pressure on Lebanon. There already is. There's a great deal of Western influence and Israeli influence there. And then with the loss of Syria, those forces that were resisted the West and Israel are just greatly weakened, most of all Hezbollah. So again, it's the future for Lebanon is particularly bleak.
Is HTS, are they allowing Israel into Syria to take part of the lands? Or
Yeah,
right
well,
now
they
they just
keep on,
don't have control? What's
right.
the...
Well, they keep on making these, rather fulsome statements of praise for Israel. How much they love Israel and how much they want to get along with Israel and how they welcome the Israelis in their country. They've just gone overboard on that.
Really?
Again, the original Al-Qaeda supported Palestine, and that was one of the reasons, the justifications for the 9/11 attack. That Bin Laden made that quite clear in his statement. At some point, Al Qaeda decided just to jettison that. Just decided it was inconvenient and to make peace with Israel. It kind of reminds me again of the ultra nationalists in Ukraine. Hatred of the Jews was a big part of who they were. And then at some point, I think they decided, well, this doesn't help us, so they just jettisoned that. So, as let's say in HTS, it's just okay. Yeah, we love the Jews, but we hate the Shia. Yeah, hating the Shia is what we're all about, and killing them. And then in Ukraine, it's like, okay, yeah, let's forget about that whole Jewish question. But we know who we hate. We hate the Russians, and we just want to kill them. It doesn't matter if they're civilians, pregnant women, or whatever, children. We just want to kill them, and that's what they do.
Pretty terrifying.
Yeah. No, these are some of the. I've heard them described as some of the worst people in the world. The jihadi head choppers. They're some really awful, awful people. And I think you can say the same thing about the Ukrainian ultranationalists. And these are the people that we support. At one
So,
time we admitted they were a problem, but when they became useful to us, they're now our people.
so do you see HTS, Al Qaeda, and Israel that this is actually just a friendship that's actually going to last, or is this something that you think Israel will try to depose of HTS after it
Yeah.
gets a certain amount of
Right.
strength? I mean,
Yeah. I think. Right. Israel is very happy that this has happened, but I think they probably don't want to see a very powerful jihadi state right on their border. I think they understand the potential is that power could be turned against them. Because at some point, if they start to feel like they've attained a certain amount of power, they may decide that, after all, the Jews aren't our friends. As we had to make a temporary truce for them in order to defeat the Shia power. But now that we've done that, let's go after the Jews. I think that that's a real possibility. And I think Israel is probably thinking that's a possibility. So Israel, I think the preferred outcome, I'm sure that the preferred outcome for Israel is just chaos. And they're going to try to encourage that whichever way they can. If for example, if there appear to be fissures within the ruling forces there in Syria, they'll support one force against another. They will encourage divisions. I think that's been their policy all along, and that's what they'll continue. That's what they'll try to do.
Will we see Turkey try to carve off a piece of Syria? Because right now it
Oh
seems
yeah,
like it's the sovereignty of Syria is in question, right? I mean,
yeah, oh yeah. Well,
it
very much so. I mean, it always was really. That's the sad thing. Essentially, you could say the Syrians won the war, but they never got all their country back. There was a lot of the country that was belonged to these foreign occupation forces, and Turkey has pretty much outright taken a belt of territory in the north, and they'll probably look to expand that. And they do want to get rid of. It's interesting to see what will happen in the east, where the Kurds are and the Americans are. Um, the Turks really don't like this independent Kurdish force. So I think they want to see the Americans go, and they want to take on the Kurds. Uh, we'll see what happens.
So how do you see Syria potentially being carved up? Turkey takes a bit. How far do you think Israel will go? Do you think they'll? I mean, Greater Israel
Yeah,
constitutes a huge part of Syria, like Damascus, and I mean, it takes all
yeah.
of
Well, there are
Lebanon, right?
different.
How?
Yeah, well, there are different kind of visions of what Greater Israel is, or what it could be. Yeah, that's kind of. I think the big question. Again, this is obviously a huge victory for Israel. It greatly strengthens their hand in the region. It's a great victory for Netanyahu and in general for the extreme right within Israel. And you say, well, the future of Israel looks good, but I think like the dark clouds again is what is Israel itself. We saw that with the October 7th attack. That was a successful military operation carried out by Hamas, right? But if Israel had handled it correctly, they could have negated it. They could have responded rationally and in a way where they got international support, and they could have neutralized the threat. But they didn't respond rationally. We saw what happened. They went on this genocidal rampage, and now it was Israel in the end that really hurt itself much more than Hamas ever could have hurt it. Uh, Now Israel, has been given this gift of Syria on a platter, and they could, if they respond rationally, it's not impossible. I mean, with like Netanyahu might just say, just take this as a big win, a win like a huge win against Iran and against Hezbollah, and then and kind of maybe um, um, maybe at least temporarily abandon his ambitions to go after Iran directly. He might do that, and it would, but the opposite could happen. He could say, "Hey, we're on a roll. Let's go for it. Let's go after Iran big time," and that could be the fatal misstep. Again, it's Israel, because of its excessive ambitions, may end up still destroying itself, because yeah, Iran has been weakened by this. They're losing an ally, two allies, Syria and Hezbollah, but it remains a real power, a military power there in the Middle East that has, they, and I think everything that we said about like the relative strengths of Israel and Iran, those are still true. And if Israel just kind of loses all caution and goes after Iran in a unrestrained way, it could again be to Israel's destruction. But we'll see. Again, it's like a question of how rational. I wouldn't bet on the rationality of the Israeli leadership. Again, this probably is going through their heads. Another thing that, again, we've talked about that Israel could do and could really turn the Sunnis in general against them is if they do blow up the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and we do have people in the Israeli government, in Netanyahu's cabinet. I think Smotrich or Ben-Gvir, one or the other, was actually part of that movement. I can't remember which one it is offhand. They do something like that, again, they'll have all the jihadis now, united against them. I would think so anyway. I mean, if they really are serious about their Sunni faith.